The countdown to COP28 has begun. In December this year, leaders or their representatives from about 195, 196 odd countries will get together in Dubai to have one more round of discussions about how to deal with climate action. COP or COP means Conference of Parties. What conference, what parties? It's a conference of countries that were parties to a UN convention that happened in 1992 and which came into force in 1994. It is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC. The word parties here refers to countries that were parties to that convention. In these COP meetings, all countries join hands together to sit together and discuss how to deal with the deleterious effects of climate change. And scientists have determined if the rise in the global temperature, the global warming, could be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius of the average world temperature as obtained in the pre-industrialization era, that is roughly the period between 1850 and 1900. If we are able to limit the rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees, it's okay. This is called 1.5 degree pathway. But if it goes up to 2 degrees, we can still manage, still somehow cope up and live. This is called 2 degree pathway. But if it goes beyond 2 degrees, it's really going to be very, very bad for all of us in this world. In COP21, which took place in Paris in December 2015, all countries agreed to work together towards a common goal, that is the 2 degrees Celsius. So this came to be called the Paris Agreement or the Paris Accord, and that's a landmark in the history of climate action. It practically means that the entire world meets for these COP meetings. The COP28 or the 28th COP meeting will happen in Dubai between November 30 and December 12 this year. As in every COP, many themes will be discussed this time also, like mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, how to phase out fossil fuels, finance, and so on and so forth. But the leading theme this time will be what is known as Global Stocktake. What is this Global Stocktake all about? At the end of Prime Minister Modi's visit to UAE in July, India and UAE issued a joint statement. It said many things. Among them, this line also occurs. Both leaders highlighted the importance of global stocktake and its successful conclusion at COP28. What is this global stocktake? This video is going to be all about that. As the name suggests, global stocktake means an exercise to take stock of the situation as obtains today. How far have we come? What is to be done in the future? Article 14 of the Paris Agreement says, global stocktake is meant to assess the collective progress towards achieving the purpose of the Paris Agreement and its long-term goals. At COP24 that took place in a city called Katowice in Poland in 2018, it was agreed that global stocktake would address 3 major areas. One, mitigation. Mitigation means all the collective efforts that the world takes, all the countries take, in order to check further rise in global warming. Other one was adaptation. Adaptation means all the efforts that we take to cope up with the deleterious effects of global warming that have already become inevitable. You can't do anything about it. And the third one was means of implementation. These are things like finance, technology transfer from those who have the technology to those who don't have the technology, capacity building. All these things come under. In the last COP that was held, that was COP27, which took place last year in 2022 in Cairo, Egypt, the developed countries agreed to create what is called a loss and damage fund. Loss and damage basically refers to the measures that we take to help a country to get back on its feet after being hit by a climate action. So in COP27 in Egypt last year, it was agreed that a loss and damage fund would be created. Nothing else was said. just the decision to create such a fund was taken, and this global stock take this time around could possibly include loss and damage also. So essentially we are talking of four things: mitigation, adaptation, means of implementation, and possibly loss and damage. Now it must be understood that this global stock take is a 5-year exercise. So this global stock take began in 2018. It happened in 3 distinct phases. In the initial phase, what they did was data collection. This took place for 2 years or so. That is, scientists were employed to collect data. The second phase was technical assessment. That is, all wise men sat together in the German city of Bonn in June 2023 to mull over or to pore over the data that was collected in the last few years. That was called technical assessment. So first was data collection. After that got over, they all sat for technical assessment, and after this technical assessment got over, all of them sat down together to pore over the data collected. They discussed various things, and then because of the discussion, it is expected that in the month of September, a synthesis report will be brought out, and this synthesis report will be the basic text on which COP28 will deliberate. All countries will have this text and then deliberate over the contents of the text. So what happened up till now is the scientific phase, and now what will happen in COP28 is the political phase. Now the World Resources Institute, or the WRI, says this stage is critical as it will determine how countries will politically respond to the gaps and opportunities identified in the technical phase. In the first few days of the first days of COP28, all leaders and representatives will sit and discuss the synthesis report and come up with some summary findings, which will be taken up for some kind of a political decision in the final days of COP28. Hopefully some kind of a meaningful action plan will emerge. Going by the experience of previous COPs, practically nothing can be expected to be delivered this time. The fundamental difficulty in climate talks is who will pay for climate actions. In the best of times, the developed countries have not been willing to pay. The developing countries do not have enough money for climate action, and everybody is stuck on this point. And now the developed world is in some kind of an economic slowdown, mainly due to the Ukraine war. Things are not looking very rosy, and therefore it is to that extent even more difficult to expect a meaningful climate action. How difficult the situation is, you can get an idea about that from what Franz Timmermans, who is European Commission's Executive Vice President and a leading negotiator of the European Union, from what he said in the Bonn meeting in June 2023 is very revealing. He said, and I quote, "Let us be frank, many of our citizens in Europe will not buy this argument today because their worries are linked to their own existence in this energy crisis, in this food crisis, in this inflation crisis." Now, by this argument, he was referring to the principle that those countries who are responsible for the climate mess that we are in, namely the developed countries, will have to foot the bill for climate action. He said further, "This might seem very strange from an African perspective, but it is always what is closer to your own worries is always bigger on your agenda than someone else's worries." Well, there you are. The developed world is not going to pay. The developing world, once again, as I said, is not going to have enough money, and we are kind of going to be stalemated or stuck at this point. So, at the end of COP28, we will know how bad things are. We will know what to do to reach our destination of 1.5 degrees Celsius. We know the pathway, but we will not have a vehicle to traverse through that pathway.